Hey, so I woke up today thinking about making a YouTube video about the idea of being esoteric and that being esoteric is generally good in society. So, first of all, I'd like to define what esoteric means. Esoteric is effectively knowing very specific knowledge that few people know. For example, you might be discussing esoteric topics when talking about a very specific alloy for a very specific pencil, like this Rotring 600. It's made in Japan. It's a very well known company, and it's made of brass, and that's the extent of it. There is more detail about this pen, but I don't know it, and so I just know very few points. However, an engineer at Rotring will tell you exactly which type of brass this is and why it's used for this pencil specifically, the drawbacks of it, and the benefits of it. Now, why the hell do I need to know that? Well, I don't need to know that. But the engineer knows that, and that's the reason he's getting paid $150,000 a year because he knows the brass is good for this reason. And so that's just one example of why being esoteric is useful. It's because you get paid for it. You get paid for knowing things effectively. And so that's the idea of specialized knowledge. So when you know things that other people don't know, you have leverage. This is an idea that came from Naval Ravikant, and it's very profound once you understand it. You realize that the more you dig, the higher chance you'll find diamonds. So, for example, if you're digging through a textbook as a researcher, you may find a gap in the literature and be able to exploit that and come up with something novel. And so that's another benefit of being esoteric is that you're so deep into the weeds of a specific topic that you could see the pathway ahead. You could see what is coming up, and based on that, you could leverage it into something like a business opportunity or a potential research project, etc. And so, to kind of clump it all together, one important aspect of being esoteric is knowing very, very, very specific knowledge that is only known by a small group of people. And the benefit of that is that you get paid for that. You get paid for it, whether it's your own business or you work for a company that's paying for that knowledge. So that's the reason you want to be esoteric. Now, how do you know that you're esoteric? Well, one thing you may notice is that you're in a bubble. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, if you talk to your friends and they have no idea what you're talking about, then you might be experiencing the classic esoteric, I really am in this mindset that nobody else is in. And I need to either get out more or to leverage that. And inspiration is perishable, so you need to act on it immediately. It's another Naval Ravikant quote, but you need to realize that. And you may have one friend that you could talk about specific topics with, and that's a clear sign that that is some very specific knowledge, assuming it's not extremely tip of the iceberg stuff. If it's mundane, then of course it's not esoteric. But usually, if you're studying, if you're an undergrad, you're likely not experiencing esoteric knowledge But if you're in grad school, you're slowly unfolding things that a lot of people don't know. And so that's something I've experienced as a researcher. Uh, and the deeper you go, of course, the more you realize that you don't know anything because there's so many topics out there. But the specific knowledge is important, and you'll know once you've attained some of that knowledge. Now, another benefit of being esoteric is you could combine multiple interests and all these subsets of knowledge that you've attained that are very specific. You could combine them into forming something creative, something that has not been done before in a combination hybrid approach. You could be more creative because you just have more ideas, because you know very specific things that other people do not know, and so you could exploit those and leverage them again to be more creative. And in addition to that, this all ties back to just being more wise, and you could gain an aura of mystery around you if you know these very specific things and you've applied them to your work or your creative endeavors. And that goes to the quote by Seneca of a single man is like a crowd and a crowd is like a single man. You want to be the single man because if you're like the crowd, then you're not unique and your skills aren't valued, and you will not be treated well by society because we work on the operating principle of trading value. So someone will give you money for the knowledge you know, for the things you know, for the skills you've attained throughout your life. They will pay you for those skills. And so that is why the more esoteric, the better, because the specific topic of a specific topic of a specific topic is not going to be known by a lot of people. And even if you know the pitch diameter of this specific thing that is for this specific industry and why it's the best for this specific application, you will be rewarded because you've taken the time to understand things that other people have not done. And so it's kind of like the equivalent of training for a job. So if you train to work at Starbucks, you're going to learn how to make a strawberry acai or a caramel macchiato. And right after you've trained for it, you're already better at that job than anybody that's not at that job. And so you've attained knowledge that people don't know, and you're going to be useful in Starbucks. So in the same lens in a more general lens, you learn a specific formula and you apply it and you'll get rewarded for that. It may not be direct like a paycheck from a minimum wage job, but indirectly you will get rewarded through your pursuits, whether career or creative or entrepreneurial. But yes, that's why being more esoteric, the better. Now, how could you actually take steps to be more esoteric? Well, the biggest thing is being curious. And the more curious you are about things in the world, the more you'll realize how complicated everything is. And you will want to dive down 10 Wikipedia pages until you learn a very specific fact that may or may not be useful in the future. You might learn how, a specific structure is able to hold even though it doesn't look like it's able to hold, and you might be like, oh, interesting, why is that possible? And then you stumble across basic physics and you get into Newton's laws of physics, and then you will eventually lead yourself down to very complex behaviors found in the world that are modeled through various uh, equations. And so that's just one example, but going down rabbit holes is important. Of course, you need to stay focused with whatever vision you have for yourself. However, if you want to be more esoteric, you need to learn more things every day, no matter what. But remember, the more time you spend on a topic, the more esoteric knowledge you will attain, and the more useful you will be to people who are in that field. It's very simple. It's a simple idea, but I find that it's not explicitly stated enough, and it's always useful to actually hear it sometimes, because you may actually just be blinded, tunnel visioned into certain jobs where you're not learning anything, and you might lose the actual purpose of everything, of being more esoteric, and the reason why you need to be esoteric. And everything is just brighter when you learn things. Everything is much more exciting. So that's another reason to be more esoteric. But anyways, that's my spiel for the day.